Good morning. As we're all just arriving, please make sure you've got a cup of coffee, you've got some breakfast if you haven't enjoyed some already, and we'll begin very shortly. Good. I think we can make a start. So welcome everybody to January's installment of our Breakfast Briefing series. As I say, grab a coffee, grab some breakfast, make sure you're settled in and sitting comfortably as we dive into today's topic, which is all about defining your carbon and net zero targets. So if we have a look at our agenda for the next hour together, we are going to be having our senior consultant, Joe Venables, informing us and educating us on how to define your carbon and net zero targets. So we're going to look at why are carbon reduction targets required, how should a business best approach setting those, and looking at some of those definitions in this fairly technical landscape. Joe will then lead a fireside chat with two members of Seismic's client community, Seb Sitskoorn, Head of Sustainability at CarTrawler. And CarTrawler is the world's leading B2B technology platform connecting customers and travel companies to car rental and mobility solutions globally. And also Abigail Sharp, who is Sustainability and B Corp Lead at Sheard Packaging, who are a sustainable packaging solution, and all of their products are 100% recyclable by the end user. So Joe's going to be leading a fireside chat with Seb and Abby. And after that, we'll make sure there's plenty of time for our panelists and Joe to respond to your questions. So please keep your questions dropping into the chat throughout the session, and we will come on to those towards the end of today's session. Next, I will briefly tell you a little bit about Seismic. So we are a sustainability advisory, and we are made up of a team of B Corp experts, ESG strategists, communication specialists, reporting experts, and of course, net zero carbon advisors as well. So, and we're an international team that really is focused on helping the companies that we partner with to prosper by becoming increasingly impactful forces for good. Here is a little sample of the businesses that we have been very fortunate to partner with. And we're helping them to take a baseline read of where are they today, and then moving towards their bespoke created sustainability ambitions and implementing all the hard work along the way across their ESG strategy, B Corp, communications, carbon net zero, as discussed. And you'll see that we are working with a range of sizes, a range of sectors, and very lucky to celebrate some fantastic progress with our community. This slide gives you a little overview of Seismic services. So as I say, we partner with companies to understand where they are and what their bespoke sustainability ambitions are, and then we help them move from one to the other. And we do that by supporting across ESG strategy, so optimizing ESG sustainability performance with an ongoing action plan. We also use the B Corp framework, and we've got 60 plus collective years helping companies across over 800 BIA questionnaires. We do capacity building, so it's partnering with companies to provide bespoke support to equip them with the skills and processes they need to implement positive impact. And then we do reporting across a range of voluntary and mandatory disclosures. Communications, making sure that we help our clients to share their fantastic work and lead and influence their sectors in that way. And of course, carbon and net zero, which we're going to be diving into in, of course, more detail in this session now. So we're going to have a poll pop up in a moment. I'd love you to please share where you are on your journey of defining your carbon and net zero targets. So are you at a 1? No carbon measurement just yet. At a 2, you've got your scope 1 to 3 footprint in place, or are you at a 3 where your targets are set and you're on the way? If you could just share where you are now. Fantastic. We've got some brilliant results coming in. Okay, so we're at quite a good spread across from 1 to 3. So I'm pleased to say that today's session will definitely give some good context no matter where you are in your journey currently. But please do, if you have any specific questions relating to where you are, make sure you're dropping them in the chat and we'll have time to come on to those audience Q&A towards the end. I am now going to be handing over to Joe. I'm very pleased to introduce you to Joe Venable if you haven't met him just yet. Joe is one of Seismic's excellent senior sustainability consultants who works across our carbon services, carbon and net zero. And he really specializes in helping the companies that we partner with to set simple carbon reduction strategies with meaningful, big impact off the back of their work. So pleasure to hand over to you, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Inga. And yeah, lovely to have all of you online today. And yeah, as we said, sort of regardless of where you are in this journey, we hope the session is useful to you. And yeah, please drop any questions in the chat and, you know, we can potentially follow up offline as well. So yeah, this is me. I'm a senior consultant here at Seismic. Very briefly, I've got about sort of 7-8 years working as a sustainability consultant. I've been at Seismic for about 2 years and really got my teeth into all things sort of scope 1 to 3 footprinting and net zero before it was cool. So yeah, when I started my career working for JLL, you know, our goal was to have maybe 1 or 2 of our sort of real estate clients signing up to kind of net zero targets in a year. And really the uptake's been exponential since then. So it's really good to see. So yeah, within today's session, we're going to first, you know, focus on the why. So touching on really why carbon reduction targets are required, and really specifically for businesses. So yeah, why are carbon reduction targets required? There's a nice little GIF here on the left-hand side of the screen, which really shows the importance and urgency of setting targets now. So yeah, this chart shows global temperature increase throughout time. And as you can see, there's really an exponential growth as we sort of hit the later years. And we're very close to really reaching that 1.5 degree threshold. So really, unless ambitious climate action is taken by governments, businesses, and the population sort of now, global temperatures are set to continue to rise exponentially. So it really highlights the importance of decoupling, you know, business or population or just general growth from emissions growth as well. So yeah, moving on to some of the consequences, there'll be many more which are kind of specific to your business, but you know, touching on some of those climate risks, there's going to likely be an increase in the frequency and severity of extreme weather events. Within oceans, there's CO2 rises will cause oceans to acidify and also rise as well. It's going to impact our biodiversity. So the natural systems that are, the flora and fauna of our planet occupy will be shifting, which, makes it less habitable. Also on the sort of adversely affect human health. So, not carbon dioxide specifically, but a lot of the greenhouse gases have adverse, human effects, respiratory or otherwise. Then moving on to, increased food and water security. Again, as temperatures rise, the systems as we know it will change, which will then in turn affect the yields. And really all of these points work together to really disrupt the foundation that our society is built on, which re-emphasizes that point of decoupling growth and emissions. So yeah, to mitigate against these adverse impacts of climate change, it's absolutely critical that all of the Earth's stakeholders to work together to combat climate change. I would argue that businesses really are in a unique position because they can be agile with their movements and, with a clear, coherent strategy at the top, they can quickly affect change in a way which is more difficult for, say governments. And yeah, further to this, at Seismic, we really believe that businesses should be leading this charge and set carbon reduction targets in line with climate science. And this is important because quantitative goals ensure clear communication on progress. It also ensures everything is, against a common standard. So we're comparing apples with apples. Secondly, one of my favorite quotes, really, I think it's Lord Kelvin, father of the absolute temperature scale, but effectively you can't manage what you haven't measured. So that measurement is the first step there. And then really onto, the position of businesses, why I personally think they're absolutely central, is they're dynamic and they can rapidly change global behavior. So, if a business can propose a solution which is, low carbon and easier for the society, then chances are it's going to be uptaken much more. Then really on to keeping ahead of the curve to protect your business from increasing climate risks. So, the direction of travel is really clear from legislation, from government, from consumer trends and from other businesses, taking a science-based target uptake from my analogy when I first joined. If you don't do it, one of your competitors will, and that will kind of leave you in the dust slightly. So yeah, just wanted to touch on really why carbon reduction targets are required here. And then sort of moving on to, how businesses should approach setting a target. So at Seismic, we believe, becoming net zero is a great ambitious goal, but it's potentially quite an intimidating one. So really, we believe it's important to break this sort of challenge down into manageable chunks. And really, I'm going to be touching on these first three boxes today. So yeah, with these first three boxes, you can do these in any order. But at Seismic, we recommend first starting off with your measurement. So measuring your scope 1 to 3 footprint. Back to you can't manage what you can't measure. Then coming up with developing your net zero pathway and action plan. So, based on your carbon footprint, how do you and sort of actions you can implement as a business, sort of how far do you expect to be able to reduce emissions based on measures you can actually implement. And it's also important to consider business growth with this. So yeah, the first two stages are measurement, and then coming up with your plan for reduction. And then, after this, we really recommend formalizing that in a kind of formal target, which we'll also be kind of touching on later in the section, later in this presentation. So yeah, after you've got these sort of first 3 steps completed, you'll have a footprint, you'll have a plan to reduce those emissions, and you'll also have a target in place to kind of hold yourself accountable against. And then subsequently, it's a case of really implementing those measures within your net zero action plan, realizing those emission reductions, and then measuring and reporting carbon against your target progress. So, once you've set a target, there's a requirement and expectation to keep, measuring your footprint annually, and then subsequently communicating it to, really show the good work you've been doing in reducing your emissions. So yeah, the next couple of slides, I'm going to be just going into these first 3 boxes in a bit more detail. And yeah, hope you all find this useful. So start off is measuring your scope 1 to 3 footprint. So I've got a image taken from the greenhouse gas protocol, which is really the sort of Bible that sits across all forms of carbon measurement, reporting, and target setting. And the GHG protocol breaks down your carbon footprint into scopes. So I'm going to just touch on this image and just hopefully give a bit of context to what sits beneath it. So first of all, when we talk about a sort of carbon footprint or a carbon reduction target, it's actually referring to your greenhouse gas emissions. So at the top of this image, you can see, carbon dioxide as well as methane, sort of nitrous oxides, and then sort of HFCs and PFCs. So there's basically a number of different gases that contribute towards, the greenhouse gas effect. And for the purposes of carbon reporting, they're all reported in carbon dioxide equivalent. And this really just makes things easier to communicate, and it allows you to focus on the main goal of, what's our impact in terms of greenhouse gases. So just as an example, methane has 25 times the kind of global warming potential of CO2. So it's basically reported as 25 carbon dioxide equivalents. So that's the greenhouse gases. Then moving on to the scopes. So the greenhouse gas protocol breaks down your greenhouse gases into different scopes based on how close they are to your operations and how much control you've got over them. So starting off with scope 1, these are the ones which are most close to you, and this is you directly pumping out these greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So commonly that can be gas from your buildings, fuel used in company vehicles, potentially refrigerants as well. So yeah, that's scope 1. Then moving on to scope 2. This really refers to electricity consumption and also in some cases district heating and cooling. And specifically, this is where, while you are not pumping out those greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, they are being generated off-site or at a power plant, and you're directly using that energy consumption. So one thing just to note with scope 2 is there's 2 ways of reporting it. So you can do it on a location basis, which is, based on the grid average of, say the UK or Ireland or any country really, or there's the market-based approach, which is based on the supply you procure. So in short, if you procure 100% renewable electricity, you can report the associated emissions as zero on a market basis. Then moving on to scope 3, where things get a bit more potentially challenging, but also interesting. So scope 3 looks at all of the other emission impacts that sit within your upstream supply chain and downstream value chain. So this can cover everything from, purchased goods and services, waste, business travel and employee commuting upstream. Downstream, it can cover things like your transportation and distribution, the use of any of your sold products, and then, potentially any end of life kind of waste treatment as well. So there's quite a lot of categories, but in reality, it's not as scary as it might look, because some of these emission sources just won't be relevant to your business. So, when measuring your footprint, understanding what's important to you is a really critical first step before collecting a load of data. So yeah, then on to the sort of how you should approach setting a target with the net zero pathway and action plan. So at Seismic, we really believe that if you're going to set a target, it's great to have a plan for how you're going to get there. So this graph is really an illustrative example of how that action plan looks. So the purple line, the flat line is basically your baseline scope 1 to 3 emissions. And what you should do is really understand what levers as a business you can pull to reduce those emissions. So as 2 examples here, just taking electricity as an example. With electricity, there's two levers you can pull to reduce its emissions. The first would be, consuming less energy, which also has an additional cost benefit. And the second one would be switching to a low tariff. So for each of your emission sources, really, there's 2 main levers you can pull, which is one, reduced activity, and then reduced emission intensity. While doing this, it's important to consider how you're expecting your business to grow. So you can see a red line sort of peaking and then troughing slightly here. And, when you set a net zero target, they should be absolute from that baseline year. So it's important to consider how your business is going to grow while doing this. You'll note that this illustrative example does sort of peak and trough. And this is really based on the assumption that as your business grows, you're not going to be following this purple business as usual example. You're going to be implementing the measures identified in your action plan as your business grows to, again, decouple business growth and emission growth. So yeah, now on to the kind of third part of our approach, which is sort of setting a target. So I'm going to run through these, and there's a few different slides here which really cover sort of lowest to highest ambition. So starting off with carbon neutrality. So this is the kind of lowest ambition, and really the requirement here is to measure your footprint annually, make carbon reductions where you can, and neutralize your carbon footprint with high quality offsets. Now, this is applicable to organizations of any size. However, the really important thing to note here is just carbon offsetting does not make your business net zero. And secondly, offsets cannot contribute towards your reduction goals. They kind of need to be reported separately. The next is a near-term science-based target. So the SBTi is an industry body designed to kind of give validity and clarity on what a sort of carbon reduction target in line with climate science should look like. So there is a few different options for these, but starting off with the SME target. So the requirements here is to measure your scope 1 to 3 footprint, and sort of before 2030 reduce your scope 1 and 2 by around 42%, and then to measure and reduce your scope 3. Within this, you're required to report all of your emissions annually over the target window, and the target needs to be submitted to the SBTi, the industry body, for validation. So just on the SME targets, if you're not aware, at the end or at the start of 2024, the SBTi changed the criteria for what constitutes an SME, really to bring it in line with other reporting frameworks out there. So now if you want to set an SME science-based target, you need to meet all of these criteria. So less than 10,000 tons location-based scope 1 and 2. You can't, own or control ships. You cannot own or control sort of power generation facilities, combustible fuels. And you cannot be a financial institution or within the oil and gas sector. And you cannot be a subsidiary of a sort of larger organization, which would fall into the larger business tract. So you've got to meet all of these criteria, and also if 2 or more of these secondary criteria are true. So that's based on employee headcount, total assets, turnover, and if you are not in a forest, land and agriculture sector as well. So yeah, this change is quite significant. And if you're unsure of sort of where your business sits, then please get in touch with Seismic. We're happy to help demystify this for you. So yes, staying on the sort of near-term target, this would apply to sort of large organizations that now do not meet this criteria. But in short, you'd be also looking at a sort of 42% scope 1 and 2 reduction, as well as a 42% scope 3 reduction there. There is a sort of caveat here that there are quite a few options with science-based targets, and one of the sort of valid options is having 2/3 of your suppliers also having science-based targets. So it's working with your supply and value chain to bring them all along on that journey. Similarly, there's a requirement to reduce and report your scope 1 to 3 annually, and again, this target would need to be submitted to the SBTi for validation. So yeah, these are both near-term targets, and now I'm going to basically show you that long-term target. Now the SBTi published this framework a couple of years ago now, and really it's designed for organizations wanting to be really bold and ambitious with their carbon reduction goals. And you can kind of think of this target sitting on top of that near-term target here. So the requirements are quite similar as before, but the big difference here is to commit to deeper and more ambitious cuts by 2050 or earlier. And in reality, this equates to a 90% reduction in scope 1 to 3 emissions from your baseline year. Once this has been achieved to be sort of the gold standard of net zero, organizations are required to neutralize their emissions with high quality offsets once the target's been achieved. And one other point is this would apply to organizations of all sizes. So if you're an SME or a large company and you want to set a long-term target, you'd be signed up to the same criteria. So yeah, that was a sort of whistle-stop tour through defining your carbon and net zero targets, and now want to move on to the conversation with our carbon and net zero leaders. So Inga kindly introduced them earlier, but yeah, we've got Seb from CarTrawler, who works as their head of sustainability, and Abby from Sheard Packaging, who is their sustainability B Corp lead. I've had the pleasure of working with both of them, and it's been an absolute pleasure. So yeah, really looking forward to this discussion today. So I'm just going to take the slides down while we have this conversation. Fantastic. Good to see you both.
Hi, Joe.
Hello. So yeah, to start with, it'd be good for both of you to just give us a high-level approach, your high-level approach for defining your carbon targets to date. Could I start with Seb on that one?
Yeah, sure. So I think for us, our approach was first identify the biggest contributing factors to our emissions through our carbon footprint measurement. Once we had done that, we really used the SBTi targets and guidelines to kind of set targets for ourselves. For us, that was fairly easy because we're on zero emissions for scope 1 and 2. So it's really about scope 3. Now, the good news for us is that we've recently had our targets approved by SBTi. That's that near-term target. And for us, there's no specific requirement to reduce scope 3 yet within those targets. But we're still using that long-term target you were just talking about, Joe, for that 90% reduction over time towards 2050 to really guide us on, okay, right, what action can we take now to reduce our carbon footprint in scope 3?
Fantastic, Seb. And I guess over to Abby, could you just give us your kind of high level approach to defining your carbon?
Yeah, definitely. So kind of similar, I guess, getting our carbon footprint and really understanding our scope 1 to 3 measurement was really important. And then kind of once we'd understood what our carbon footprint was and what that makeup was, we could identify what our kind of key carbon hotspots were, where our biggest emissions lie. And then it was about really understanding what our pathway to net zero looked like. What was that? What was our route? What was the actionable reductions that we could take? And then once we kind of had the pillar of our measurement in place, we understood what our pathway was, then we could really look at setting targets. And like Seb, we also have set a near-term target with the SBTi, and we actually just had that approved in December, so it's very recent for us, and a really great milestone that we're proud of.
Yeah, just to say, like, massive congratulations and sort of effort for getting that over the line. Yeah, you've both done absolutely great work. So back over to Seb. I was just wondering if you could talk a bit about your company's key carbon priority right now, and how did you make that decision?
Yeah, so for us, I would say that's definitely business travel, and specifically through air. We have over 1,700 partners throughout the world. One of our slogans is relationships make the difference, and we'd really like to invest in those partnerships and those personal relationships that we have with our partners. Unfortunately, that also means that our PRMs and our reps fly around a lot, right? So for us to be able to reduce that would make have a significant impact on our scope 3 emissions. So the good thing in that is that we have full control over how much, with whom, and how we fly. But so in the first instance, I'd say for us, it's really about, okay, let's make sure that we fly with airlines that have approved SBTi targets, right? That's one way of reducing our carbon footprint there. But over time, it's really about how to reduce the volume of flights over the year. That will require a cultural change within our business. So we just want to make sure that we embed that properly over time. So that's going to take some time. It's definitely what we are working towards.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, these things do take time. But I guess back to that sort of slide at the very start is, if we don't start implementing those changes now, they just won't happen. And yeah, so yeah, it's great. So yeah, I guess over to Abby, could you also answer sort of what's your kind of key carbon priorities right now, and how did you kind of make those decisions?
Yeah, I mean, initially our key carbon priority was setting a target, which we've just achieved, which has been great. I think then your carbon footprint really acted as a bit of a materiality assessment of letting us know what our key carbon emissions were that we needed to address. So for us, being a manufacturer, it's probably no surprise that our energy use is a real carbon priority and something that we need to prioritise. So looking at both renewable consumption and procuring renewable energy, and also generation. We have some solar panels on site, so making sure we're kind of optimizing that and using that to the best we can. And then also for us, also we manufacture packaging and corrugated packaging. Our raw material therefore is cardboard. We use a lot of it. We converted 150 meters squared last year. So for us, we need to make sure that how can we make our cardboard less carbon intensive. So that's kind of our key priorities at the minute.
Yeah, and I think, Abby, that sort of re-emphasizes that importance of working with your supply chain, because it's carbon, global carbon reduction absolutely needs to be a collective effort. There's no point one country or one business sort of taking the lead in isolation, because inevitably, companies are all interlinked. You just re-emphasizes the importance of working together, and so that's great. So back over to Seb. Have there been any exciting partnerships or collaborations that have helped advance your carbon goals or kind of innovate within this space?
Well, this is going to sound really cheesy, but it's really been the collaboration with Seismic on so many levels, right? It's not just our carbon footprint measurement and setting our SBTI targets or pathway to net zero targets. It's also been support on our B Corp journey. It's also the support that we are getting for our journey towards CSRD. And I think those things really help us get into a position where we're ready to take on those responsibilities, know what we're up against, know what actions we need to take. So I think Seismic has been instrumental for us to understand as a business what actions we can take to reduce our carbon footprint and have a better impact as a result of what we do as a business. Outside of that, and that's not something that's related directly to our carbon footprint, but it is the work that we're doing with our partners and suppliers. So as mentioned before, we work together with car rental mobility suppliers. As you know, there's a massive push for people driving more EVs. So that means for us that we would like to support our partners in being able to provide more eco-friendly options to their customers. But on the other end, that then also means that we need to work really closely together with our suppliers to make sure that, for example, those EVs and hybrid cars are available, but maybe even more so, that the infrastructure is there at the location for people to be comfortable to drive around and be able to recharge those EVs, right? And one of the ways we do that is provide reporting to our suppliers at specific locations, so they can go to local governments to say, right, here's the volume of EVs that we're expecting at these times of the year. This means that we need about this capacity at this specific airport or at this specific pickup location or in this area, because this is the volume of EVs you can at least expect over a set number of months.
Nice. And are you just within that, are you particularly from customers seeing a need for or a demand, additional demand for EVs really?
It is growing. So if you look at what EV pickup rates were a bit over a year ago, right? So the EV pickup rate would be the number of EVs rented as a percentage of the total number of rented vehicles. That went from about 0.4% to now almost 3%. So still relatively small numbers, but grew significantly, right? Like if we're going to hit that about 4% target that we've set ourselves towards the end of this year, we've more than tenfolded the initial number of a year ago, right? So it is growing, but like the main concerns customers have there is that infrastructure bit, range anxiety. So I know that I might get a limited range from my car, and I know the infrastructure might not be there to charge. So it's really making sure that customers are informed of the place where they can comfortably rent that EV. And it's really making sure that where customers wouldn't be comfortable with renting EV, that we work together with our suppliers and local governments to get that infrastructure in place, because it's really what is going to be required to make people feel comfortable to make that switch.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, as a, you know, I sort of see car rental as, you know, maybe you're going on holiday and, you know, you've got to rent a car and it's like, oh, maybe I'm going to try out an EV, and that's in turn will help, you know, drive the market uptake. So yeah, thanks, Seb. Back over to Abby. Have there been any exciting partnerships or collaborations that have helped you advance your carbon goals and innovate in this space?
I mean, I feel like Seb might have stole my answer a little bit there with the collaboration, but one of our main collaborations again has been working with yourselves. I think we've made massive progress over the past 12 months. You know, we've kind of been able to do our carbon footprint, have our action plan and our clear pathway to net zero, and set that validated target, which has been great. And that's been, you know, a great partnership that we've had, and really given us confidence to come on and have these conversations that, you know, 12 months ago we probably wouldn't have been as comfortable to do. So that's been great. And then also from us, as I've said, we're a manufacturer, so our raw materials are a massive emission source. So from us, we've also looked at it from a product innovation point of view. So we just launched our mobile innovation centre, which we refer to as MIC, and that was really about getting our technical and design teams out to our customers and looking at value optimization. So how can we optimize our product to value optimize it? So whether that be material use, actually the product design itself, and that in turn has a cost benefit for our customers, but it also has then environmental impact as well, and kind of looking at the whole full circle of our products. So that's been something that's been really exciting and that we're really proud of.
Yeah, it's been amazing to, you know, see, obviously, yeah, you're a great business, but see how you've kind of brought carbon really to the forefront of things and using that to inform your business decisions. Just for the audience's benefit, I haven't paid either of Abby or to say nice things, but yeah, it's very kind of you. We've loved working with you both. So yeah, I've got a couple of sort of final questions really to share. Is really based on your experience. Do you have any advices for businesses when they are defining and setting their targets? I guess let's go over to Abby first on this one.
Perfect. Yeah, I think my first piece of advice would be start with the data collection. I feel like I'm beating the drum for data collection, but making sure that is accurate, and you've got systems in place so it's repeatable. I think it's really, really important, and we've reaped the benefits of that. So you know, if you need some measurement tools in place to gather your scope 1 to 3 carbon footprint, get that in order before you start rushing on to setting targets and making things that maybe aren't quite as tangible as whenever you first started. I would say lean on the experts around you. So without working with Seismic or equivalent, I don't think we would have really made as much progress in and advanced as quickly as we have. So that's been really, really instrumental for us. And lastly, I would really encourage to also speak to kind of key customers and key suppliers. You know, it's very much a collaboration. So we've, you know, our scope 3 is 91% of our total emissions. So we need to engage with our supply chain, and we've got really good relationships with our key suppliers. So having the conversations of, okay, what do you know about your carbon footprint? What are you doing to address it? And really learning off each other, kind of what things have worked really well, and things that you can maybe adopt for your business, and also maybe learn from things that haven't quite gone as planned. So that's kind of, yeah, mine would be use that as well.
Yeah, those great tips, Abby.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I guess over to Seb. Based on your experience, yeah, what advice do you have for other businesses starting this journey?
Yeah, I'd say fairly similar to Abby. it's really the 3 points of getting a solid understanding of what factors impact your carbon footprint, right? And one of the things that really helps us, as Abby said, is have a solid infrastructure in place for gathering that data, right? Sometimes you can run into challenges around third-party vendors to get the information you're looking for. So for us, for example, it was our landlord. Now, Joe, you know about the about 300 emails that we sent him over the course of 5 weeks to get the required information for a carbon footprint measurement. So those are kinds of things that you can run into, but you can definitely mitigate that by having the proper infrastructure in place. So for anybody who's starting off on their journey, don't get disheartened. The first time might be challenging, but if you set it up right, then the subsequent years are going to be way easier. I think point 2 is really understand then, once you know what factors have that impact, is understanding the weight of the factors and how much you control have over changing them, right? Because you could have a massive factor, but if you have no control over it right now, there's probably not a lot you can do. So once you understand the weight and you understand the control you have over them, then prioritize your actions and go, right, okay, well, here's the plan on what we're going to do with these points, because this is what we can influence now, and here's the impact that will have. And if there's anything that's massive, but you don't have a lot of control over, potentially think about how you can create a sphere of influence there. So either by building the relationship with that third-party vendor, with your landlord, or whoever you have that challenge with, or think about a way you can move that from third-party vendor maybe internally, so you have more control over it, right? If that is feasible for you. I think a key factor there is to increase the speed and on how you influence your controllables is just the leadership team buy-in. That's been a massive enabler for us in CarTrawler. Our leadership team has massively bought into this, and it really has helped pushing the dial a lot quicker than we would have if we wouldn't have had that buy-in.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with your points. But just further to that, you know, your carbon footprint isn't sort of an academic exercise. At the end of the day, it's a management tool for reducing your environmental impact, which has sort of additional, you know, cost saving potentials and sort of market opportunities as well incorporated within that. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, team. It's been lovely to speak with you both. And I think next we're going to move over to the audience and have a bit of a Q&A session. So hello, audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Abby and Seb, for the insights you've shared with us there. Encouraging everyone to please drop your questions in the chat. And we've got one to start us off with from Chris. Chris, I wonder if you would like to share your question with us about just how to get started as a distributed business. And if you have any trouble with the muting, unmuting infrastructure, then I actually have your question here. I can read it on your behalf. That might be simpler. So Joe, I think this question is one for you. Chris has shared, you know, for a owner-managed business that is dispersed and relatively small, just what's maybe the first 2 things they should do to get started on their journey?
Yeah. So I would, you know, first really start off with your scope 1 to 3 measurement. That in itself can be, you know, quite a challenging task, you know, especially first time around. So I would first off start with your scope 1 and 2 measurement. That's, you know, fairly straightforward and easy to do. The data should be available. And then, you know, looking at your scope 3, which of those data sources would be easy to collect, and really, you know, start off with a partial scope 1 to 3, sometimes called an operational scope 1 to 3. So yeah, break it down into manageable chunks.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joe. Chris, hope that answers your question, but do follow up with us if any further guidance needed. I have a question. Seb, you mentioned how CarTrawler are engaging the suppliers noting that they make up the majority of your footprint. So that's just where you focus. This is something that I'm sure all of our audience have the same challenge to build that in a data collection process infrastructure you mentioned. Have you picked up any tricks to, as you say, don't get disheartened? It will take a bit of time to build that engagement, but what's your best tip to kick it off well?
Well, so I'm a massive fan of automation. So what I tend to do with suppliers, or what I did before to build that relationship, was first just ask for what you want. Just be really specific on, okay, right, here's the information we're looking for. Ideally, this is the metrics we have them in, right? So you could get for data centers, you could get the spend you have based off of that. You could sort of recalculate what your carbon footprint would be. But ideally, you would just have, let's say, the energy usage in kilowatt hours. So be very specific on what you want and how you want it. Then if you find them unresponsive, make sure you follow up with them regularly. And if we're talking regularly, maybe first do it weekly. If they don't respond after a couple of weeks, do it twice a week. Until you get at a stage, hopefully you will never get there, where you do it daily. If you get to that stage and you really find them uncooperative, just go, right, I just want to get this sorted. Here's what I can do to help you automate this, so this will not cost you a lot of work over time. So good example of that would be what we've done with our landlord, right? So we share our office building with a couple of other businesses. We have separate waste collection, but that contract sits with our landlord, not with us. So we don't have direct access to the portal that we have for our data on waste production. So what we've done there is I've just built a little script for them, installed it on their computers. Now that pulls the information from the portal and it emails it to us directly every month, right? So yeah, I'd say if you have the capacity, or if you need any support with that, you could just hit me up. That's perfectly fine. I'd be happy to support there. But I'd say if they are unresponsive in terms of requests that you have, and there's something that you can do yourself to sort of help them out, for me that's worked to get whatever I needed for the carbon footprint measure.
Thank you. That's a really wonderful point. We find again and again in the work that we do collecting from third-party vendors, it looks like a spreadsheet job, but really it's about people and engagement, and, as you say, finding out what can you do to make it a little bit simpler for them to keep them on side. Abby, you mentioned product innovation and the mobile innovation center that you have at Sheard, going around and seeing, okay, how can we rethink the product in order to create value for our customers and consumers? I wonder if any of the audience might be considering similar initiatives. How would you recommend they go about finding the right focus and making the decision to set up something like that?
Well, I guess for us, we've always had a design team, and we've done product innovation in house. But I guess we're all very busy, and you've got we work with customers that have a lot of different heads that need to be in the room to kind of make decisions, especially regarding product development. So I would say that what we looked at was, how do we get all the right people in the right room, and how do we make this a really valuable time, and how do we actually get action out of it and create a product or a change that's really useful and creates value for them. So I would say how we approached it was, we looked at our product, we recognized that let's take our design team and our innovation team to them. We can get all the right people in the room. We can spend a day or 2 days on their site. We can assess all their products at the full circle, and really figure out what levers we want to adjust. So whether that be design, whether that be transport, and really looked at it all as a real life cycle. So I think there's a lot to be said about a product innovation and how you can kind of adapt that to create more value for your customers, but also a big environmental and cost benefit. So I don't know if I answered. I hope I did. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you. And there's actually a question from David that kind of follows up on that one, Abby. David's expressed that to measure the Scope 3 footprint for a manufacturing company with all these raw materials and hence the product innovation team in place must be quite expensive. How do you see that, and how do you go about this?
Well, I guess for us, actually, I feel like we're quite unique. Joe, feel to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. We manufacture through corrugated cardboard, so we manufacture cardboard boxes. So our raw material is it's one element. We're not manufacturing a product with loads of individual different components. So I guess for us, really, we've got a couple key suppliers. It's about engaging with them and about really having the conversation, as I said previously. Where are you on your journey, and how can they take steps such as procuring renewable energy and things like that to make their manufacturing process a lot less intensive. So I would say that the cost lies with them, as a supplier. They need to be measuring their own scope 1, 2, and 3 measurement. That's their carbon footprint. You want the data from it. You want to be able to report on that for yourself. But really, the cost initially for their measurement sits with them. But yeah, I would really encourage just have the conversation, and then start having that conversation now. You don't want to get to the point in a couple of years where people have been left behind because they've not taken action and done that now.
Yeah, completely bang on that, Abby. And yeah, just to say, manufacturing is more complicated, again, depending on what you make. But that, particularly when it comes to the net zero reductions piece, sometimes having a really significant emission source in your baseline is actually a good thing, because the reductions you need to make are very ambitious. So it gives you, more pieces of the pie that you can pull levers on.
Absolutely. Thank you very much to our fantastic panel speakers. Thank you, Abby, Seb, and Joe, for the conversation you've led for us. And to our audience, I hope that's given you some good insights. If you have any further thoughts and questions you want to discuss, let's keep the conversation going. Please do get in touch. Finally, let's wrap up the session. And I'm excited to let you know that our breakfast briefing for next month is going to be about demystifying sustainability and reporting disclosures. So covering both the mandatory and the voluntary side of things in this very fast moving, fast evolving landscape of frameworks that are coming out. So please do join us on Tuesday the 13th for that session, and we look forward to seeing you there. Have a fantastic Tuesday, everybody, and thank you for starting your day with us.